Hello, everyone. My name is Akaleb. I work at Build Up as the Africa lead. And I'm standing between you and coffee, so I'm just going to do this very quickly and invite my panelists to the stage to join me. And I also won't try to set the conversation because that has already been done. As we're talking about polarization and deliberation, this is what we'll be discussing. Please have a seat. And here we're basically going to be talking to two people who are now actually doing this type of work, who have experience in different spaces, and just get to learn from them and get to learn from the experiences. So to start, maybe just introduce Nadim Nashif on my father's left. He's a digital rights advocate and social entrepreneur, founder and executive director of AMLE, the Arab Center for the Advancement of Social Media, which works to promote and protect Palestinian digital rights. He is also the founder and publisher of Sabra, an independent Palestinian media platform. Nadim serves as the chair of the Global Majority House Coalition. He sits on the advisory board of the Digital Democracy Initiative, as well as the Global Reference Group for Deutsche Welle Academy. He previously served as a policy analyst with Al-Shabaka, co-founded Untold Palestine, and directed Baladna, a leading Palestinian youth organization throughout his career. He has remained committed to human rights and global community development, both locally and globally. Please, a round of applause. Thank you. And then, to my immediate left, I have Julia Kamin. She's a researcher based in NYC, New York City, who works with organizations that leverage social science to foster social cohesion, both off and online. Currently, Julia is the director of impact and evaluation at the Listen First project, where she supports a coalition of 500 plus people, bringing organizations in measuring the impact of their work. She is also the managing director of Pro-Social Design Network, where we'll hear about it some more, a nonprofit that promotes healthy online spaces by connecting research to practice around evidence-based pro-social design solutions. Thank you very much. A round of applause. Great. So maybe to kick off, I'm going to start with you, Nadim. And I think a lot has been said about the space of polarization, the link between social media platforms and polarization, and how we're seeing that becoming even worse. So from your work, as you're working in AMLE, which is basically focusing on promoting digital rights for Palestinians, can you just give us your experience of what you've seen as the impact of social media in polarization or in the Palestinian people in the last 3 years?
Yes, so basically, I think social media platforms that are mainly coming from the US, as we know, American-centric, they have been aligned in a very specific politics during the last decade or so. And that's including having positions, even if they are not declared, but in practice, the way that they are doing content moderation, the way that they define things, what is allowed, what is legitimate content and what's not legitimate content, to whom the company is doing moderation and to whom the company is not doing moderation. This is very politics, all right? This is not only the technical aspect of it, of how the product is designed, of how the social media is designed. It's also about decisions and definitions that the company take. And the company have took a decision not to be with the Palestinian side, to discriminate the Palestinian side in a very clear way. This comes also on the background that the US companies, the social media companies also have seen not only the Palestinians, but the Arabic language, the Arab countries, the Muslim countries in a very suspicious way. In the way that they dealt with the content moderation historically, and there are different research about it, that this content have been over-moderated for over than a decade. The Arabic classifier, the classifier is obviously the machines that are doing the content moderation. As we all know, the content moderation is done mostly, like maybe more than 90%, is done automatically, not by humans. So the Arabic classifier have been overdeveloped in a sense that it's coming to censor. So many keywords in Arabic have been historically, although they are essential and focal in the Arabic, not also in Arabic-speaking countries, but in Muslim countries and the Muslim. And this comes obviously by American companies who were created after 9/11 and the whole approach of the US, how they are looking at this region, etc. So this is one layer of discrimination and over-moderation. And the second one that we as Palestinians suffer from is basically that the company aligned itself with the Israeli side in the way that they are seeing the Palestinians, as the bad boys, the negative side, the one that need to be over-moderated. And this is not something that Hamle or Palestinian digital rights organizations are saying. This is something that we saw the true color of it at the beginning of the war on leaks that were published in the Wall Street Journal. So in that report, it was stated, they had the correspondence between the executives of the company, and they were taking very clear positions. They were saying, this content that is coming from Palestinians and the neighboring Arab countries, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, these are the bad guys that we have to do more over-moderation on them. And they decided to lower the threshold. So if content that was posted on their platforms had to have 80% assurance that is violating their guidelines and community guidelines, they dropped it to 25. Now, 80% is already problematic, but to drop it to 25% assurance that the content is violating and to have it being removed automatically, this is a very aggressive approach. We can all agree, and also, clearly that it will have many mistakes in the way of what they are taking down. And it means it's basically suffocating. And that's why for Palestinians and pro-Palestine activists, they feel that there is a war on their narrative, that the company is deliberately attacking constantly the Palestinian content. And they have been all of these struggles going back and forth with the company. There have been digital rights, global one organizations and local ones, and the MENA one, having, speaking with the company, trying to intervene also through the oversight board and trying to impact the company approach. But I have to say, this is also need to be seen in a kind of geopolitical, also global majority versus northern countries and the Western camp, because if we look how they dealt with Palestinian content, is not only about Palestinians and genocide that's happening in Gaza. This is also about one genocide that was mentioned about the Rohingya and how they dealt with. This is how they are dealing also with the Tigray and the massacres and the genocide that's happening there. This is the way that they have been dealing also in other places in the world that they are not taking into consideration. And as much as I said about the Arabic language that's being over-moderated, I want to tell you that the Hebrew language, for example, the classifiers of Meta on Hebrew language were deployed only in summer 23, just a month before the war started. And this is after a long battle of Hamli and many other organizations pushing the company that you have to deploy. So meaning, until summer 23 in Hebrew, you could say anything in the platform. You could say kill, rape, whatever would come to your mind. Even after this classifier was deployed, we have been doing tests around the classifier, because we seen also ads that were promoting for genocide, ads that were promoting for, calling Palestinians to leave their country because we are coming after you, etc. All of this was also approved. So unfortunately now we have a kind of inefficient Hebrew classifier that's still there. We have been producing different reports to test it and to go to the company and to tell them, listen, we are talking in a case of a war, of genocide that's happening to the Palestinian people in Gaza. We are talking in a case that Israeli politicians, I'm not speaking about ordinary Israeli citizens, Israeli politicians are calling to wipe out of Gaza, no innocents in Gaza, kill them all in Gaza, rape, burn, the most horrible and atrocious things that you can even think about. And the company is still not dealing with it in a serious way. The content is not being moderated in the way that it should be. While in other cases, there is over-moderation and content that is legitimate, that is political, that is supposed to be part of the conversation is being deleted. And again, if we zoom out and look from a global perspective, when the war in Ukraine started, Meta had exceptions for Ukrainians, meaning that content that is violent was allowed on the platform. Now, I'm not in favor of violent content, not even in situation of occupation, but still I understand that in certain cases when there is occupation, when people are oppressed, yes, the company have to give them a special treatment and to look there and to try to mitigate the risk. But this has happened only there. When it comes to Palestinians, it's the other way around. The exceptions are going to the aggressor, the exceptions are going to the occupier and to the other places. And looking again globally, what's happening to the Rohingya, looking at Kashmir, in Tigray, and other places, the company is understanding and positioning itself only when it happened to the Western camp. We understand and we change the policy. When it happened to the global majority, we don't care. We don't care about their lives. This is the message that is coming from Meta. I'm talking about Meta, but obviously it's very similar to the other social media platforms who are based in the US.
No, thank you so much, Nadeem. And I think there's also a tension between what we see these tech companies do in other contexts. For instance, in Kenya, they've come in and they say, we want to help you moderate. But here, it's a question of, no, you're over-moderating. So it's like on one side, they're pushing for moderation, and then in the context that you've shared, it's like, yeah, we are going to over-moderate and silence some voices. So, and we'll get back to that in a second and just talk about like what some of the things that you guys are doing. But you mentioned these tech companies are based in other parts of the world, mostly the US. So Julia, I just want to turn to you and just perhaps in the same breath, what are you seeing as the impact of social media in the US context?
Thank you, Caleb. And just want to say what an honor it is to be here and be part of this conversation. So you know that I'm a social scientist. I might not have told you I wrote my dissertation on polarization in social media, so apologies if I wonk out on everyone. But interestingly, if you talk to social scientists, American political scientists, and they look at the impact of social media and polarization, the evidence is mixed. There's this famous 200-page Google document where that aggregates research. Some research says, yes, it is, social media is influencing, is increasing polarization. Some says, actually, the evidence isn't there. I think that the trends are pretty clear, and Alexandra said a lot of it already, what social media does is it polarizes not always in the way that people say it does. So it doesn't actually create echo chambers, which is a common theme that we talk about. It actually breaks our echo chambers, but not in the way that we want it to. So we're exposed to diverse views, but they're not thoughtful, reasoned views. They're usually views of the extremists or people who just, they hold their views so strongly and passionately, they express them in ways that engenders more anger and fear. Alexandra said, yeah, you think about social media, it's about hate and lies. But I want to also point out that yes, the metas and the industry participates in kind of pushing up this kind of hateful content because it's very engaging, it feeds their engagement algorithms. But there's also human nature at play. There's a lot of evidence that we, as humans, most of us, and even the best of us, at times, we are more likely to forward something that has moral outrage in it than not. And then moral outrage, of course, is really highly correlated with the kind of misinformation that gets moved around. I don't know how much evidence we have, but I think it's pretty clear that misinformation farms that try to divide, they know human psychology, and they know moral outrage is what's going to have information diffuse more broadly. But I think if we talk about the past 3 years, I think past 3 years have been different, but not that different. We still see these general trends of how social media works and how, again, it perpetuates or it moves, it spreads moral outrage, it spreads misinformation. And while, yes, there have been some worsening trends, through ownership, in the US, through a different administration, there's a lot more tolerance on many platforms for hate speech. But at the same time, and of course, AI is probably, I think it was mentioned earlier, is just going to make it much easier to kind of produce the misinformation that flows. But at the same time, we should acknowledge that there are some platforms that are trying to make things better. I see Ravi's here. The Neely Index has shown that it's not universal. Some platforms are making moving in a positive direction and trying to create more social, not create more social cohesion, at least reduce the kind of worse toxic engagement that we see.
Great, and I think just listening to both experiences, you hear first like this approach in the US, which is like platforms are moving in a positive direction, but then you get to Palestine, you feel like, okay, no, they're not really moving in a positive direction, actually an active player in the conflict by moderating or over-moderating or under-moderating some of the content that you're seeing. And
just to be clear,
yeah.
some platforms are moving, not the majority, yes, just to be clear.
And I guess the point here we're trying to make is how the geopolitics, as Nadeem said, plays out even when we think about online harm, when we think about polarization. It's not just standard for everyone, that some countries will experience it based on just the actor or the tech companies playing a different role in the conflict, as opposed to standing out as an observer and saying, how can we help moderate the space so that you guys are, either living in a peaceful context. But so I'll move still back to you, Julia, and I know in your work you focus on advocating for pro-social design that can address some of these challenges that we're experiencing in different parts of the world. And before we even get into how that happens, can you first tell everybody in the room what you mean by pro-social design, and what is that?
Okay, thank you. So even though I'm with the Pro-Social Design Network, I need to say up front, we don't own the phrase pro-social design. If you ask a dozen people what pro-social design is, they'll have a dozen answers. But just as a working definition, we say pro-social design is a set of features, design elements in a digital space that foster healthier engagement and interactions, and that also build a base of safety, well-being, and dignity for the users. So that's just kind of a working definition, but really, the fundamentals are a couple of principles. And one, and you'll hear many in this space say this, design matters and is not neutral. So the design choices that a platform makes are going to affect people's behavior either in a positive or negative way. And so in pro-social design, we say platforms need to take responsibility for that, and then to carefully and thoughtfully design for pro-social outcomes. And a close corollary to that is that, we heard a lot about content moderation and the approach that often these platforms take is identifying identifying problems and diminishing harms, and we've heard from Nadeem the complexities and the challenges and the problems with that approach. Pro-social design takes more approach, rather than just trying to identify and remove harms, is to both design more proactively, not only to foster healthy engagement, but also to reduce negative kinds of interactions. So if we talk about, for example, misinformation, and I'm going to say up front, pro-social design is not a panacea, it's not a silver bullet, but for example, an approach it would take in addressing misinformation is to say, rather than the platforms identifying what is and what is not misinformation, we've heard that's a problem, empower users to be able to reduce the spread of information. So one example of a pro-social design is an accuracy nudge. Very simply, we talked about how people spread information because it kind of it sparks all those negative, fearful emotions and anger. But we also have a part of our brain which is thoughtful and then values accuracy. So by cueing accuracy while people are browsing or while people are about to spread information, asking a user, is this information accurate? You actually see people reduce how much they're going to share misinformation. So it's possible to kind of engage the user. And that's just an example. We can talk about other examples.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. And I think we've had different conversations about design playing a key role, not just humans being in the back end trying to moderate this content because of the human error, and also the fact that we are responding to this content after the fact, as opposed to how do we even prevent it from not showing up in the first place, but almost like just reducing the harm before it comes out. But Nadeem, I just listening to this idea of design, and the context that you're in and the work that you're doing, do you see this as something that can be applied there? And if yes, or what are some of the things you'd think about when you're thinking about this approach to addressing some of these harms? Because I know you're already doing some work, maybe not that space, but just to see, would this be useful in that space?
I would say that product design and the social design is really important on the technical level. So we are speaking like how engagement with hateful or things that make you outraged is like much stronger, and the way that technically it's built in a way that would engage that, and having these are in a more let's say positive or not encouraging these kind of phenomena is really important. But I want to go back also again to the definitions and to the politics behind it, right? Because the companies are setting certain things, they are promoting certain narrative and reducing other narratives. So two examples that, for example, in the last 2 years during the war and the genocide, one is about the word shaheed. So the word shaheed in Arabic, it means martyr. And it's a word that not only used in Arabic, but also in Muslim countries. So Meta decided for long years to have a blanket ban. So if you write the word shaheed, they would remove or they would restrict your account. And there is a whole discussion, like a global one, like why are you doing so? So they were saying the word shaheed it's kind of praising violence. Like when you put it, you're praising violence. Obviously, this is very Islamophobic approach. And lots of people were criticizing the company. This is not the way it is. It is used by 2 billion people across the globe. Everybody, like in different countries, it have different meanings and in different constellations. And yes, maybe in a very few contexts it would be praising violence, but in the vast majority it's not. And you have to have a nuanced policy. So this is one example. The other example is for many European countries, unfortunately, adopted IRA definition. And IRA definition are the new definition of anti-Semitism. So anti-Semitism, as we know it, is hatred against Jews, and this is something that obviously should not be on any social media platform. We should fight it. We all agree on that. But then the state of Israel, the governor of Israel, promoted a new definition of that, saying that also if you are against the state of Israel, against the government of Israel, and against Zionism, then you are also anti-Semite, which is obviously, it's just conflating for political purpose. Unfortunately, sometimes the platforms also adopt this definition, and unfortunately also some European government adopt this definition. Now, obviously, for Palestinians who are under occupation, under apartheid regime, under genocide, criticizing the state of Israel and the government of Israel actions would mean that your content would be taken. So also, again, this is a kind of very much around political definitions, orientation, how the companies are seeing themselves, etc. I want to say another issue around the importance of it's one narrative, more than one narrative, facts, alternative reality we're living in. So during the war, there was this campaigns and kind of battle around narratives. Is there starvation in Gaza? Are people dying from the lack of food or not? So the Israeli government was promoting and stating there's no starvation. They have enough calories to live. And then the Palestinians and others were saying people are starving, like children are literally dying from the lack of food. And then if we, this is like the importance of the social design and having disinformation and misinformation, even if it's coming from governments, that there is facts, there are facts. We also need to acknowledge that. We understand that we need the diversity, but there are facts and facts should be stated. And when there are sites that are promoting disinformation, this also should be treated by the platforms.
Yeah, and I think just to echo what you're saying and just to try and see this question of sometimes the design itself might be trying to address all these harms that you're seeing, but also you bring in this aspect of there's a political element within the platforms themselves that sometimes override some of these design solutions and they choose based on a particular orientation. But I want us to switch gears a bit and talk about deliberation, because we've been thinking about polarization and we've been looking at all the harms that exist on social media. And my question, again, linking it to design, every time we think about deliberation, we are very careful about the design because we don't want to almost replicate the harms we are seeing on social media. So we're very careful of how those spaces are going to be shaped and who is going to show up in those spaces and engage in a way that they feel that they're heard without being targeted. And again, going back to you, Nadim, and I'm just curious, in the work that you've been doing in Palestine, have you been able to create some of these spaces? Have you seen some of these spaces where people are able to have these conversations almost as an alternative from the harms that we're seeing on social media?
So people are trying to create, there are kind of more safe spaces where people from both sides, Palestinians and Israelis, trying to have these spaces of communication, of dialogue. In most of the cases, they are kind of more closed groups, I think, in the current atmosphere that is not very much allowing this. There is lots of polarization also within the Palestinian society, very strong discussions and lots of also internal hate speech that is happening because of the situation, because of the intensity, and because of different opinions about what happened and how, as people, we should continue there. I think people are also trying to find other spaces that are maybe a bit more designed in a way that they are more friendly. This has been also a whole discussion, how we deal with the companies and how, in a way, we hold them accountable about what they are doing, how we can find spaces that are more ethical for us, not only for Palestinians, but generally, how they are dealing with our privacy, with our data, etc. In an era, because we are living in an era that the companies dropped any kind of mask that they had before, the Trump era, that they do care about human rights, that they have a progressive policies, etc. We also saw the change with Meta, for example, with Mark Zuckerberg declaring that he would actually adopt the policies of Elon Musk and X in the way that they're doing content moderation, that they will allow more hatred, etc. We also see the companies stating clearly that they are weaponizing AI. Right? So Google for many years said that they will not be part of weaponizing AI. They will work with the governments only on the civic part of it. And they have been actively now weaponizing AI and supporting efforts of war, including the Israeli army. So it's a different era, and I think we do need to make choices to move to more ethical platforms. If we have WhatsApp and we have Signal, to move to Signal, and there are many other choices that we can make also as users, because we have to hold them accountable. We have to have alternatives.
Thank you so much. And Julia, maybe the question is, in these spaces that we're seeing on social media, even with social design, do you see those holding and creating some of those spaces if they're implemented, or are we better off just, when we're moving to deliberation, create other spaces where we can have those conversations?
Yeah, so I would say both. So pro-social design, we try to support both technologists who are creating new, healthier, inherently pro-social spaces, as well as working with folks in the platform. So these platforms are either a lot, the profit motive results and politics results in a lot of bad stuff, but there are also people in these organizations that are trying to make them healthier. Maybe not the majority and maybe not in the C-suite, but we try to support pro-social design for both. You may have heard the term the pluriverse, so the Fediverse, all the spaces where people come together. So I think we can have some elements of pro-social design, create healthier spaces in the large platforms. And we've seen them begin to use some of the technologies, some of the pro-social designs that are effective. Very simply, when people are engaged in a heating discussion, if they're saying something that might be borderline against the policies or might be otherwise just offensive or harmful, just a small, hey, do you really actually want to post that? Maybe you want to reword it. It seems like it may be harmful. That's something that, again, can be effective. And then I think there are people in the room that are here that are developing other technologies to perhaps bring mediation into these spaces. So that's possible. I'm seeing Bart into, and I want to, we talked, so going back to misinformation and the problems with content moderation, another way to kind of harness Pluralism is by, instead of just de-ranking the divisive, find what we call bridging content. Content where people across the divides tend to agree that there's some value and merit, and push that content up. So I think Sparkable is in the house, and we'll be giving a talk later to talk more about bridging algorithms. But I do think generally the answer is, and I think a couple others have mentioned already, is to move more towards a pluriverse model. And as many people have said today, and many others say, it's not reasonable for us to think that there is a one-size-fits-all policy across all platforms for people. So the more we're creating smaller spaces that can be more culturally sensitive to language, and also we find that smaller spaces are more likely to reinforce and support healthy norms of discussion. And we see, so norm signaling, having thoughtful stewardship is also a way to promote healthier spaces online. So I do think while we can help these large platforms be a little more pro-social, I'm seeing the answer more towards smaller spaces. And if we have things like our access data portability, so we have more access to ability to move across platforms, then that can hopefully shift them all towards in a pro-social way.
Great, thank you very much. I also want to open up very quickly. Anybody who has questions can take a few questions to the panelists. I think there's a moving mic somewhere in the room, or you can take mine. There's a question there. Maybe let's take 3 very quickly, and then there's a question here. Maybe, yeah, Lena, raise your hand at the back, and then one here, and then one more. Okay, and then one at the front.
Thank you, Caleb. Thank you, Julia and Nadim. Lena from the Council on Tech and Social Cohesion. Nadim, as you explain like the horrors of this decreased ranking and silencing of the content, and then hearing Julia talk, just as she said now, about the opportunity of interoperability that could lead to a pluriverse of platforms, did Samla ever consider like mobilization for a massive boycott? I'm curious, because that could have been a tactic. We can vote with our feet when we're not succeeding with other efforts to have more equal spaces on these platforms. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's take the other 2, and then you can answer all of them. There's a question here. Just, raise your hand. Yeah.
I wanted to add a comment.
Maybe introduce yourself first.
Yeah, I'm Kasim, so teaching at Kanazawa University in Japan. I wanted to add to what both Nadim and Julia already said. So, and that is, some languages are called low resource. That's another aspect of the problem when it comes to content moderation. We did an experiment with my students in the class, and we found that many languages, because there are so few users, that they are not really generating significant income to the company, so they are not of really importance for the company. So they don't invest much on that language. So they are called low resource. So in that experiment, we put the same, words in different languages, got moderated. But in certain languages, it didn't. We added a picture. With that picture, the AI detected it and got moderated. So that's a problem. And they don't know, and they don't feel responsibility that even if there is 1 million users, from a business point of view, it might not be really, income generating or like that. But at least those 1 million users are doing a lot of harm to their society, promoting violence. So that's, destroying the social fabrics. So that's another point I wanted to are based on our work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And there was a question there. Yes. Yep. Yeah, just turn it on.
Hello, my name is Hriday Jaz and I'm like a grad student from the United States. So I have been following the work of Amle and like the violence indicators you guys have created. It does have a huge impact and the reports and everything. It does show like how just not like regulating harmful content without political will is meaningless. So we talk a lot about the deliberative designs and we talk about accuracy and we talked about fostering healthier engagements. So my question here is like, when there's larger power asymmetrical relationship out there and when there's like not equal access towards legitimacy, how should we rethink these pro-social designs? So like we can create more healthier solutions. Like the question I was navigating throughout the discussion is like, we know these things have to be done in a proper way, but like, let's say like there's this censorship and there's this asymmetrical relationships, how we can ensure that the systematic digital repression could be reduced?
Great. Nadim, and then.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously there is a need for strong tech accountability from the side of legislators, politicians, but also as civic organizations, we need to hold them accountable wherever that's possible in terms of on the litigation and the regulation level, to keep doing the researches and, to show the problems that are happening in their policies, etc. And there is the boycott level. And I think this could be tricky and problematic in a way that there have been attempts. For example, I can tell you an Arab attempt to create a similar social media platform like Facebook. It was funded by Qatar, and it failed miserably because I think people want to see the globe. They want to be connected. They want to be with the rest of the world. And if you push them to a place that they are only seeing, in the same language, in the same country, etc., so apparently this that does not work. There is also an attempt now by a Palestinian businessman who created a platform that's very similar to Instagram called Upscroll, and he's trying there. But again, I'm not sure this is, we do want alternatives, right? But we don't want them to be focused on one language or one country. We need something that, again, to the echo chambers. We don't want the same people speaking with each other. We want to be also impacting the world. And specifically for us Palestinians, we want to speak to the world because of our situation, because of the history and the communication, and because there is a side that is trying to push us out, because the company is doing this over-moderation continuously. So would you agree with them and you leave the platform, or would you fight back and try to stay there? Now, it's a dilemma, and there are lots of people who are speaking in different approaches, but I know that there are campaigns for boycott. There have been also declaring days by activists that in that day we will not. There have been even day by businessmen who said in that day I would not put ads in Facebook as a kind of punishment. But it did not accumulate to the level that it would change a policy in the company. And again, from my perspective, we need to do both basically until we to support new initiatives like Metsadon, Blue Sky, other places and other spaces that are a bit more ethical in the way that they are reaching their customers. But we cannot leave the social media platform totally all the time that we did not accumulate the critical mass on an alternative platform.
Great. Julia, do you want to take the question about design?
Yeah, so I think obviously there's no simple solution, and I think the question, as I understood it, is like a similar idea, like how do we move over, or how do we get to that promised land of where we have a pluriverse of pro-social platforms? So I think not saying anything new, but you know, to Nadim's point, when we think about creating new spaces, yes, they have to be inviting and attractive, right? We can't just tell people you need to go to this healthy space. People are not going to want to hang out there, right? So they have to be done creatively and engagingly, and they also we don't want them to be monolithic in their views. We don't want to create echo chambers, but we can have a pluriverse of spaces where, you know, people can talk about sports, or people can talk. Most people, by the way, don't like talking about politics. That's one thing you learn as a political scientist. That's kind of sad. People would rather be watching Dancing with the Stars than talking politics, you know. But to have spaces that could be global, but then are that are fostering healthier discussion. For example, New Public is working with a lot of public broadcasters to try to create those healthy discussion spaces. And so it's not clear what the future is going to look like, and if we ever get there. But again, I think there needs to be experimentation, there needs to be money. But again, at the end, if we are going to be boycotting, we need to have data portability. We need people to be able to move from social network to social network, be able to bring their data. I know Alexander's shaking her head like that's just not going to happen. But at least that gives people the power to vote with their feet.
Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you so much, Nadim. And a round of applause to our amazing panelists. Thank you very much. I think a lot has been said, and it's just basically open up some of the discussions we'll be having throughout the next couple of days. And I encourage you to, you know, learn, engage, share, connect, and yeah, I think up next is coffee.
Coffee.